back again. This is Module 2. Pardon me, these things are slipping a little bit. I tend to follow the theme of the textbook because, as I told you, the text is a kind of a foundation stone for what we're doing. So it is talking about building a budget. And it pretty much talks about that budget as being a universal tool, which means public, private, four-year college of the liberal arts brand, university from grade 3 all the way to grade 1. So all that type of situation is going to be the same. And we'll take a rather standard approach to it by talking first about revenue a little bit, and then talking a little bit about expenditure. And the PowerPoints we'll look at for this one look at a couple of different university systems that I am familiar with. And we'll talk about how they differ, say, from Morgan or from XYZ University or college, wherever you may be. Okay, revenue sources in general. Revenue sources in general for the university community. And I start predominantly with the public sector, because my guess is most of you are probably there. The state is our major source of money. It's based on a sliding scale that you're always playing one game behind, because you submit your budget to the state at a certain time. And a lot of it has to do with enrollment. And so the state usually does not, once they've approved your budget, if your enrollment goes up a little bit, they don't give you any more. If the budget goes down, at least for that operating year, they don't take anything away. That something may happen the subsequent year, but that's neither here nor there. The second major source of income, of course, is tuition and fees. And there are usually a wide variety of how they're handled. In the public college and university system, four-year and university with graduate programs, tuition is based predominantly on two dimensions. The first dimension is going to be if you are an in-state student. And then if you are an out-of-state student, the tuition is usually higher. One of the things that we always try to remind our students of is that Morgan is in a program within the Southern Regional Education Board. If you have not looked into that, talk to the people in financial aid, because if you happen to be from Virginia or Pennsylvania, two states that are, or maybe even West Virginia, those states don't have programs exactly like the one you're enrolled in. And you may be able to get in-state tuition because you are part of the SREB unit. We'll talk more about that. You also will have federal funding. That comes in two dimensions. Obviously, a vast majority of our students today are on some sort of financial aid, whether it's the Pell Grant, TRIO programs, scholarships, all sorts of different things that you can be on. But that's another source of money that filters through the federal government. It gets commingled with the generic tuition, but it's usually structured. Most of the universities, to move to another area, most of the universities have foundations. And that money comes in a variety of different ways, mostly through a variety of different kinds of fundraisers. And if you are in a research-based university, and virtually everybody today does research, you also have a research budget that often comes with either private foundation money or state or even national money. And we'll talk more about that. Some institutions, now I don't think Morgan does, but some institutions turn to their major sport, whatever that may be. If you're at Duke, basketball pays the bills for a great number of other sports. If you're at Alabama, football pays for everything. So we'll take a look at how that happens. Okay, one of the other things you have to be aware of, and we'll be doing a lot with that, is the thing called auxiliary services. These include things that the university runs, and they are a restricted account within the university's budget. Some are leased out. For example, Morgan has just leased their bookstore to a third party. I haven't worked with it enough yet to know whether that's good or bad. My general experience with leased bookstores, not very good. but maybe Morgan signed the right kind of contract. I don't know. Another one that is oftentimes not run by the university per se is the food service. And the university maintains housing in general. Some have agreed with residential organizations where some, at least, of their housing is handled through a third party. So we'll look at that. And really not, there's a little bit of Morgan like that, but I don't know too much about it. I can find out. A gentleman who runs housing generally at Morgan is a graduate of the PhD program. He's one of my students. Doug would give me whatever kind of information we need. Okay, one of the things we have to look at is how and where does the money get spent? For labor-intensive institutions like higher education, the direct costs, particularly salaries and benefits for a large population that serves teachers, administrators, supportive staff, etc. And the other thing that is another direct cost is what it costs to run the facilities, not the ones that have been leased, because a lease, like the bookstore, there's an agreement as to how much of the income stays with Morgan, how much goes back to the people that run it, and they are responsible for the operating costs. We'll look more at that. There are a number of indirect costs that emerge in the area of university operation. Largely those can be services. Security, for example, is a very popular one to be contracted out because of the nature of the need for it these days. In almost any university you can think of, you will find that a lot of people have licensed security. I mentioned the bookstore, mentioned housing. There can be other kinds of services that come into play. Certain kinds of maintenance, for example, can be leased out rather than maintaining a large maintenance staff. Morgan, I think, does a really, really fine job with their campus. They didn't when I first came some 10 years and some months ago, but the new president, Dr. Wilson, kept it in-house, and the campus looks better than it has at any time that I have been here. Okay, just for a second, because I've only got about a minute and a half left, let's talk a little bit about what happens with the private institutions. Well, one thing you obviously know, if you've ever looked into one, their tuition is much higher because they don't get state or, well, they do get federal money. They don't get state money, except, of course, if you live in Maryland. Of the 50 states in the union, Maryland gives more money than any other one of the 50 to its private universities. I've often questioned that, but when you look at how the legislature runs in Maryland, so many of the legislators who make the decision on that money are graduates of private institutions. All you have to talk about, one of your best examples, of course, is Johns Hopkins. And there are others. It's also a town that has a great many religiously affiliated schools, and they get a little bit also. Okay, the other thing that tends to be you'll see a little bit more leasing in the private schools because it's easier for them to have a contract year to year for things that that larger universities like a Morgan might very well find it productive to retain themselves. So anyway, that pretty much gives you an idea of the basic of a budget. We'll look at a couple of other institutions that have somewhat different forms, just so when you walk out of here in 6 weeks, you'll have an understanding of exactly what you might run into if you chose to go and be employed at a private institution. So thank you very much for your attention.